Nobody ever gets killed round here. I mean, they're mostly detached houses. You never even hear shouting. So it took me a minute to tipple to what she was saying. I said, "Dead? Is it a heart attack?" She said, "Oh no, nothing like that. Just look at me, I'm in my bare feet." I only really know her to nod to, only they've a lovely magnolia. So once when she was in the garden, I called out, "You've had more luck with your magnolia grandiflora than I have." Only she just smiled and said yes. And since I didn't have another remark up my sleeve ready, that was the end of that. I do that all the time. Start a conversation and can't keep it going. Blondish woman. Bit washed out looking. Nice, tired sort of face. Anyway, she comes out into the road and waits for me to get to their gate and says, "I know I don't really know you, only there's something wrong with Mr. McCorkadale." I was actually in a bit of a rush because I planned on getting the 5 to 9 and going into Sainsbury's. But anyway, I went in. I said, "Has he been poorly?" She said, "No, I've a feeling he's dead. Come through. Only, Mrs. Horrocks, he doesn't have any trousers on." I said, "Well, I do a stint at the hospice twice a week. That's not a problem. Only, to be fair, I just take the trolley round. I've never actually been there when anybody's been going. And they say I'm not really ready to administer the consolation yet." She had a nice linen dress on, very simple. I think she might have been drinking. He was lying on his back on the rug, one of these fleecy, hairy things with blood and whatnot coming from somewhere behind his head. And it's awful because the first thing I thought was, well, she'll never get that out. He had on these green Y-fronty things, which I would have thought were a bit young for somebody who's retired, but Henry's the same. Suddenly takes it into his head he ought to go in for something a bit more dashing. Little Terrelin socks. I said, "Should I touch him?" She said, "Well, you can if you want, but he is dead. I've been sat here looking at him for an hour." I said, "His pants are on back to front." She said, "Oh, that's me. I thought I'd better put those on before I fetched someone in." He'd a little tattoo not far from his belly button. Now, remember when they moved in, Henry said he thought he had something to do with vending machines. I said, "Did it bang his head, do you think?" She said, "Oh, no, I shot him. I've put the gun away." And she opens the sideboard drawer, and there it is with the table mats and playing cards. He'd a gun because he'd been in Malaya, apparently. Well, my first thought was to ring Henry and ask what to do, but I couldn't face the fuss. I was a bit nervous about ringing 999 because I'm never quite sure what constitutes an emergency. And anyway, I thought, seeing as she's waited an hour already, I might as well get her a cup of tea first. And as I was running the tap, I called out, "Police haven't already been, have they?" She said, "No, why?" I said, "Nothing. Only there was a pair of handcuffs on the draining board." Policeman was having difficulty writing. Big boy. Nice ears. Spelling all over the place. And when I asked him what he thought had happened, he said, well, it's marriage, isn't it? The stresses and strains of. Though we don't generally expect it from oldish couples. They've normally got it out of the system by then. And it is early in the day, isn't it? People seem to like to get breakfast out of the way before the shooting starts. I was just signing my statement when Henry arrived back and, of course, prolonged the process. I don't know that this is quite what Mrs. Horrocks means, officer. What you said to me on the phone, young lady. I said, Henry, you weren't there. Policeman winks and says, now then, we don't want another shooting match. I mean, at first Henry didn't even know who they were. He said the Chow. I said, no, that's the Broadbents. So anyway, he sits about for a bit, whistling under his breath, and then goes upstairs and attacks his computer. After the policeman had gone, I went up and apologised. And I asked him if he thought there was anything going on. He said, why? I said, well, she'd nothing on under that linen dress. Of course, any suggestion of that embarrasses Henry. He's so innocent. He said, Rosemary, I don't know what sort of a world you think you're living in, but there's probably some perfectly reasonable explanation. In the meantime, let's just remember that somebody has died. I'm only too sorry that you had to be the one that was passing, because I would have preferred you not to have been involved. A bit later on, I went out to get some milk at the garage, and there were still one or two reporters outside number 17. A whole branch of the magnolia broken off. One of them said to me, are you a neighbour? Do you know the McCorkerdales? I shook my head and didn't say anything, so then one of them shouts after me, you owe it to the community. So I turned round, I said, yes, and you owe it to the community not to break branches off people's magnolia trees. And of course that's just the point where the photographer takes a picture, and it's in this morning's paper. Me looking like a mad woman. And the caption, the real face of suburbia. Whereas the real face of suburbia was Henry's when he saw it. I woke up in the night, and I could hear him whistling under his breath. I said, are you thinking about Mrs. McCorkerdale? He said, no, I was thinking about the house. Prices are down as it is, and something like this isn't going to help matters. He reaches over from his bed and takes my hand. He said, you mustn't get upset, but if we don't get at least 575, we shall have to kiss goodbye to Marbella. I keep thinking I ought to have told someone about the handcuffs. I put on my little greeny coloured outfit, which is at least tried and tested. Only when I came down, Henry said, oh, you're going in that, are you? So I went and changed into the black. No need, because it was all very casual. Policeman in his shirt sleeves and some barrister taking me through what I'd said, scarcely interested at all. I gave her a little smile. They let her sit down for most of it. She did look pale. Pleaded not guilty, which you have to do apparently, even when they know you've done it. Only one of her lawyers reads out a list of things they'd found wrong with Mrs. McCorkerdale when she'd been arrested. Old fractures, new cigarette burns, and one of her teeth loose. And then another lawyer jumps up and says, were other people involved? And she says no, and he said that he wouldn't pursue that at this stage. The upshot is that it went for trial, I said to Henry, does that mean they have to go through it all again? He said, oh yes, this is just the beginning. Policewoman called round this afternoon, said did I want any counselling. I'm entitled to it apparently through having seen a body, and should have had it earlier, only they've had a charabanc run off the road, so they've had a bit of a backlog. Pleasant enough girl, only she would go on about all the terrible, dreadful things she'd seen, accidents and violence and whatnot. Made me just seeing one body seem pretty ordinary, really. Maybe that's part of the counselling. We sat in the garden having some tea, heavy on the biscuits, polished off half a dozen sandwich creams. Said it was nice it was so civilised. Had I seen a naked corpse before? Then when she got up to go, she turned and she said, Mrs. Horrocks, when I went on the counselling course, one of the things they teach you is that it helps if you look things in the face right from the start. I said, well, I did look at the body. I actually touched it. She said, yes. Only when the police start digging, which they have to do, there's the potential for distress. I said, digging? She said, metaphorically. I said, why should it affect me? She said, all the indications are that it won't, but the potential is there. Things come out. And I want you to know that I'm here for you. I'm on a bleep. I said to Henry, it's nice she should be so concerned. And he said it's what she's there for. Unfortunately. Article in the Mail yesterday, which I always thought was that bit more refined, but no, it's full of all silly stuff about the case. What goes on behind the neat privet hedges type thing? I said to Henry, fat lot they know. There actually isn't a privet hedge in the entire road. They're mostly beeches and one or two cypress lilander. And he said that he didn't think that was the point, and to a reporter a hedge is simply something to be peered through. Still, talking of neat, their garden, which is normally so immaculate, started to look shaggy. She's got a herb garden outside the back door, and the barrage has gone berserk, bullying its way all over the border. Made me long to nip over and put it in its place. I wouldn't ask Henry, though, as I was sure he'd find it inadvisable, Rosemary, quite candidly. But no. Turns out he's all in favour. It had, in fact, occurred to him. Though it has to be said, coming at it from a different angle to me, saying that if we're to get anywhere near our asking price, a garden going to seed in the same road is the last thing one wants. So the upshot is, I've started toddling up the road with my trusty secateurs. I thought I'd cut back the poppies now that they've flowered and give the achillea a chance to come through. Of course, I've scarcely got my kneeling pad down before Miss Lumsden's out, contriving to come by with an unconvincing bottle of Lucozade en route to the bottle bank. Wanted to know if there were any sweet peas going begging. I said I'd thought of picking some and taking them down to the hospice. She said, what a nice idea. Some of them might feel a bit funny about them, but I suppose they're too far gone to care. And lots of jokes on the lines of Mr. Pemberton's "Who do I have to shoot for you to come and do my garden?" Smile got a bit fixed after a bit. Except Sheila Blanchard did actually come in and lend a hand weeding the borders. Said she didn't blame her a bit. I mean, husbands, Rosemary, who needs 'em? I said, well, they can be a comfort. She said, can they? Reggie isn't. I'm the comfort merchant. What's Henry like? I said, oh, very... And I said such a silly word. Very considerate. And I saw her face, and I mean, she's a lovely woman, but I know it'll be all up and down the road by tomorrow. But he is considerate. Timid, I suppose, always has been. Wish he wasn't, sometimes. What I haven't told Henry is that I dropped Mrs. McCorkadale a note into the prison, bringing her up to date on what I've been doing. Do it every day now, even sent her some snaps. Told her today I've been keeping my eye on the Archimella mollis. Lovely plant, but you have to read it the Riot Act occasionally. She rang this afternoon to thank me. I didn't know you could do that in prison. Ring up. Her name's Fran. Dear Fran. I've misjudged Henry. Got him quite wrong. You live with somebody for 30 years and you think you've got them all weighed up, but no. He's lost half a stone since the trial's been going and never set foot in the office. I thought, well, you're a better person than I ever thought you were. And I said to Fran, he's more worried about you than he's ever been about me. I mean, the day I had Miss Scanny went off to a golf tournament. So as a reward, I got out the brochures for Marbella, and that seemed to cheer him up. It's all come out in court, though. Turns out Mister has led her a dog's life. Literally. The defence produced the collar and lead in evidence. Beat her. Terrorised her. A saga of protracted and imaginative cruelty, counsel said. Prosecution, of course, goes after her, claiming it was all part of some game, sexually speaking. But she said that it was, if it had been mutual, he wouldn't have been interested. Anyway, how can it be mutual having your arm broken? A lot of lurid details. How he used to put a hood over her head so that she couldn't see and bring in other people to watch. Business associates, she thought. Leading lights in the world of vending machines, probably. Henry said that she'd been lucky because there was a trial going on up in Liverpool in the same week. The chap had up for killing a child and that had pushed her out of the limelight. Well, what Henry calls the wild and woolly feminist ladies were out in force, even shouting from the gallery. To a degree irresponsible, Henry says. However mitigating the circumstances, Rosemary, she has to be looking at a custodial sentence. Then when he only gives her 2 years, the judge gets it in the neck from the Law and Order Brigade. But as Sheila Blanchard says, worth every minute, dear, if you ask me. Couple of years basket weaving and you get the bed to yourself. Cheap at the price. Just wish I'd a gun. As it is, I'm pinning my hopes on his prostate. I can't go and see her so often now she's convicted. Henry doesn't know I go at all. Well, never had a best friend. The sort you can tell everything to. Never had one, never been one. Not even as a girl. Not the type, I suppose. She's in Rissington, the other side of York. One of these modern places, looks a bit like a business park or an out-of-town shopping centre. Crimes are us. She's transformed the prison garden, though, which used to be quite utilitarian, cabbages and lettuces and whatnot, but now she's got him to do some interplanting, even make it a bit of a potager. Whilst it's never going to be Sissinghurst. Besides, it's too windy, it's still streets ahead of what it was. Well, she has visions of it being open to the public, but that's difficult with it being a prison. We go and sit on a seat in the garden. And she started telling me about all the stuff he forced her to do. Wanted me to know in case I didn't want to see her again. I said, don't be silly. But terrible things. I never knew people did. And what with the hood and men watching in silence. More than watching, actually. One of them who had a funny habit, and I knew what she was going to say the second before she said it. A funny habit of whistling under his breath. Of course, a lot of people do that. I see they're selling the murder house, Sheila Blanchard called out to me this morning. Board's gone up, asking $560. I didn't say that I knew, and that it had actually been sold already. Fran says they're an Asian family. Quite well-to-do chain of electricals. I thought, well, that won't do Ma Bear any good. Poor Henry. Golf with Jimmy Tarbuck takes a knock. I look at him a lot now. This once upon a time spectator. And I think, well, sometimes I just think, you dark horse. And then other times I think about Fran and get upset. He caught me staring at him the other night, said, what are you looking at, young lady? I said, predictably, nothing. Said, you've been getting a bit broody lately. And he patted me on the knee. What I'd actually been thinking is whether all this time he'd been wanting to see me crawl around the room naked on my hands and knees. No worse than bedding out, I suppose. Though if I were to do it nowadays, I'd have to have my knee pads on, which might just take the edge off things. But then I think about the collar and lead. And I think, well, that's what my marriage has been like too. All these years being jerked along. I mean, what else is Marbella? We never could settle on what to call it. That was part of the problem. Spending all this time in the gardens got me used to things having a common name and a Latin one. Only with sex, neither seemed to suit Henry. Coming from me, anyway. Just got embarrassed. He's no idea I go and see her. I tell him it's the hospice. Farm's gone from strength to strength. She's put her onions in for show and gone commercial with her tomatoes. Spends every free minute there. Well, I say free. Except when I say goodbye at the gate. It feels as if it's me that's going back to prison. Once a month, they've started letting her out for half a day, so we've been going off for the afternoon. We do all sorts. Open gardens, obviously, car boot sales, auctions we go to, old churches, which I've never really cared for. Only Fran knows a lot about them. One church in the middle of a field where there'd been a battle. And we sit there in a pew while she explains all the architectural features. And sometimes I think I've never been so happy in all my life. She took my arm this last time. We were just coming down some steps at Fountains Abbey. And when we got to the bottom, she didn't let go. It was just like it was when I was a girl and a boy did it. Such a bold step. And so meant. I thought to myself, here I am strolling arm in arm with somebody who murdered her husband. I said out loud, I know what this is. She said, what is it? I said, it's life. She wasn't feeling all that clever today, so we just stayed in the grounds. She held my hand again. Anyway, she's going into York next week for a checkup, so I thought I might pop along to the hospital and hang about on the off chance I might see her. Only she'll be with a warden apparently, so I won't. Gave me this. I've never started a garden from scratch before. There are no features at all. Flat, stony, square. It's like one of the before pictures in the gardening magazines. Or an exercise yard. The lawn's pretty much out of the question in this heat, and the water supply's quite quixotic, though Henry said the greens at the golf club are immaculate, Andy saw Sean Connery last week, so I just sit here and look at it and draw plans. Think of it as a project, Henry says. You'll crack it, young lady, he says. I know you. She died, did Fran? A lot of toing and froing before they eventually pinned it down. No surprise to either of us. Doctors. It's the first thing that occurs to you and the last thing that occurs to them. By which time it's too late. Oh, it was always too late, Mrs. Horrocks. She was in a hospice at the finish, so I knew the drill. He used to sit and hold her hand and kiss it. And she'd kiss mine. We talked about a little garden centre. Best thing that could have happened, Henry said. Which is when I should have packed my bags. But instead I just went and sat in the greenhouse for a bit. Typical. He's taken to wearing one of these caps with the big peaks on that boys wear. Reckons it's for the sun. Caught him the other day wearing it back to front. I suppose that's what they call a new lease of life. They say there are a lot of criminals around here. Bank robbers and such like who can't go back. They golf all day. Of course, it's just what would happen in a play. Fran shot him, so she had to pay. Only this place is crawling with people that haven't paid. Unless you count just being here as paying. The garden books talk about the plants that are supposed to like the shade. They say they prefer it. I don't believe it. I don't believe anything likes the shade. Oh, they do perfectly well in the shade, it's true, but give them even... give them a bit of sun. And they suddenly come into their own. I sit here at night listening to the frogs and the crickets. and Henry whistling under his breath.